roughly, I don't know, maybe 3-4 weeks ago, we thought it would be a good idea to host a debate. We weren't sure who yet, but we discussed a little bit and we decided, why not these two? So here we have Mr. Swope and Mr. Seay. We're going to have a debate here. Mr. Arthur is going to get up in a few moments and present the rules and guidelines for you. First, I want to say thanks to both of the candidates for coming out. This means a lot to us. Not only Phi Alpha Delta to get our name out there, but to Concord University and to the community. It's not often that a community like this has opportunities like this. So we thank you all for coming out. We really appreciate it. We're really shocked by the large turnout, but we thank each and every one of you for taking your time to be here. This debate will be streamed live on YouTube. Also, it should be available afterwards, to the best of my knowledge. We are offering a $25 Sheets gift card to all the students that came in. You should have gotten a raffle ticket. If you did not, then raise your hand and we'll get one to you. Outside of that, I'm going to ask that you put your cell phones on silent. Be respectful of both of the candidates when they're speaking. We ask that you keep applause silent until the end. And yeah, so if you have any questions, Mr. Arthur is going to get up and he's going to go ahead and present the candidates and the rules of the debate. And I thank you all for coming out.
I'm Chris Arthur, and I will be the moderator of the event this evening. At this time, I would like to extend thanks to Tyler Gordon, president of Phi Alpha Delta, who put in a lot of hard work and effort into organizing this event. We'd also like to thank Dr. Jim White, professor of political science here at Concord University. He will be the co-moderator, and I would also like to extend thanks to both of the candidates. At this time, I would like for everyone to give both of the candidates a round of applause. So we had a table outside that you could ask questions to the candidates, and you can still ask questions to the candidates. If you have a question in the middle of the debate, just please raise your hand. Dr. White will see you and hand you a note card and a pen, and we will have a whole section on candidates, or on people's questions to the candidates. So here are the rules of the debate. 2 minutes will be given to each candidate for opening and closing statements. As determined, Mr. Swope will go first with his opening statement. Following that, we will go through a series of segments through which I will ask the candidates questions. Depending on the segment, each candidate will have between 1 minute and 30 seconds to 2 minutes to answer the question. If one candidate's answer directly attacks the other candidate, then a 30-second response time will be allowed. And of course, one segment includes questions from the audience. That will be determined, you will ask the questions, Dr. White will determine the ones that get asked. And we now ask that the audience remain silent and do not disturb myself or the candidates for the rest of the event.
Ready for me?
And Mr. Swope, would you please start with your opening statement? You have 2 minutes.
Can you all hear me back there okay? Well, as you know, I'm Chandler Swope. This is my first venture into elected office. I've got lots of community service on a volunteer basis, but I decided to run because I feel like I'm retired now, and I've got decades of business experience, decades of public service. And West Virginia, over the last 2 years, the leadership change in West Virginia has created the opportunity for us to move forward for the first time in 80-some years. And I really want to be part of that progress. As I said, I'm retired. I was born and raised in Welch in McDowell County, went to Ohio State University, came back here. I've worked in this area in the construction business virtually all my life. So I know the area, and I think I've got about 40 years of experience managing companies. Swope Construction Company, the most recent, employed about 75 workers year-round for 30-some years. And if you add the subcontractors we're responsible for, it's more like 300 to 400 people. So I think my experience in knowing how to sign the front side of a paycheck, how to make a payroll, what it takes to bring jobs into West Virginia, and what it takes to drive them away, puts me in a perfect position to know the kinds of legislation that will move us forward instead of backwards. As I said, I've got about 40 years experience, or nearly 40 years, managing companies in a leadership role. I've had about 25 years of what I call community service. I've been chairman of the hospital board, on the board of directors, Chamber of Commerce. I've been president of contractor associations in both Virginia and West Virginia, Hugh I. Schott Foundation, West Virginia Construction Education Trust, a whole litany of what I call volunteer jobs. And I've gotten a great deal of satisfaction out of my volunteer work. And I think being retired is a distinct advantage. I'm not beholden to anybody. I can work full time. I don't have any special interest groups funding me that I have to answer to. I can make decisions based on exactly what's best for West Virginia. I'm not a career politician. If I was, it'd be a short career. As I said, I've been retired about 4 years now. And I think that's exactly the kind of person that can represent the people rather than himself. And that's why I'm running.
Mr. Seay, would you please start with your opening statement?
Good evening. My name is Rockwell, Seay, and folks call me Rocky, and y'all can too. I'm 31 years old. I'm a small town country lawyer, in fact, in neighboring Princeton, West Virginia. I too, like Mr. Swope, am from McDowell County, right? I haven't been retired for 40 years because I haven't been alive for 40 years. Some might even say that I was born yesterday. I wasn't. I was born the day before that. I graduated from law school yesterday. But even one as young as I am can tell you right now that our state is going headfirst in the wrong direction. Now, I am beholden to special interest. I bet you weren't expecting me to say that to you, were you? My oldest special interest's name is Eleanor. She's 5. My second special interest, his name is Bo, and he's 3. My youngest special interest's name is Philippa. Those are the people to whom I am beholden. My only interest in running for state office is to try to help and create a better state that my children don't have to leave. West Virginia's greatest export has been for too long its best and its brightest. And I believe that it is very poignant that we are discussing that here at a university. And let me take one small sidetrack and say that I feel blessed to be here addressing a group of not only people who have been my teachers, but also people that I have taught at this university. Education has to be the centerpiece of the future of West Virginia, because I believe, as I once got in a Chinese fortune cookie, that only the educated are free. I really did get that in a fortune cookie, but it stuck with me. And it's absolutely true. We have to provide a better education for our children so that they can make something of themselves, so that they can, if they choose, have the life that they want to and deserve to have right here, so they don't have to try to find greener pastures elsewhere. I believe that we have to provide them jobs. We got to provide them jobs in coal. We got to provide them jobs in agriculture. We got to provide them jobs in tourism. We got to provide them jobs in anything, really, because they need jobs, right? I'm not going to discriminate against a job of any kind for West Virginia people because we need it so desperately, right? Joblessness is one of the twin plights that is facing our society, and the other one is addiction.
Mr. Seay, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap up your opening statement, please.
We got to do something about addiction so that we can do something for our children so we can make this a better state. God bless you, and thank you for your time.
And like I said, I will keep time. If the candidates are wrapping up a statement, I will let them finish wrapping up the statement before I call them out on it. You both went a little bit over. That's fine. And we're going to get started with our first question. We're going to start with a segment called Moving West Virginia Forward. It's about the budget, the economy, coal, and education. And about the steps that we need to take to pull West Virginia out of the rut that we're in right now. So the first question, last month the Charleston Gazette reported that West Virginia families spend lower percentage of their income on college education than the national average. Yet West Virginia college graduates complete school with higher than average debt. And about half of West Virginia families earn less than $50,000 per year, and they are the ones that are particularly hit hardest with the cost of college. West Virginia also has proportionally lower rate of college attendees, and this has culminated in West Virginia having one of the lowest rates of college-educated people among all the 50 states. My first question will go to Mr. Swope, and it is, are there steps you are planning to take in the legislature to help make college more affordable? And if so, how do you propose funding it?
Well, the step, it's hard to outline a specific thing, but you have to start with a basis of your income from your revenues. And and this is not a short-term thing, this is more of a long-term thing. You have to bring jobs in, and it's an all-of-the-above menu. You have to bring new jobs in. To do that, you have to have a business-friendly legal climate, a business-friendly regulatory climate. You have to provide as much incentives as you can to bring new businesses here. You have to support the businesses that are already here and drive revenues up. At the same time, you're going to have to drive your costs down. And you can't do all cost, you can't do all revenue. You have to do a combination of the above. You need a business approach to solve these kind of problems. You look at all the services that the government provides, decide which ones are the highest priority, prioritize those first, fund the ones you can afford, and try to drive enough new revenue to where you can add educational opportunities for people.
Right now, I would like to ask you a follow-up question. Do you think higher education should be a higher priority for our state budget than it currently is?
Absolutely.
Okay. The same question will go to you, Mr.
Got you back
Seay.
on schedule.
The same question will go to you, Mr. Seay. Are there steps you're planning to take in the legislature to help make college more affordable? And if so, how do you propose funding it?
Thank you for asking the questions. It's important to me most of all. I can tell you that as a young lawyer, I have a great amount of student debt, and like I say that I'm on the Jesus Take the Wheel repayment plan. I'm more fortunate than most in that I've been able to achieve a level of income that I can pay now for the education that I was blessed to receive. However, a lot of folks aren't in that same situation. What we have to do is we have to reward our best and our brightest. We have to incentivize them to stay home. And so for the folks that say go to a good university like this one and get a degree in education, right, the state of West Virginia should and ought to be waiving their student loans or helping them make payments toward their student loans in a debt forgiveness program in order to incentivize getting better educators to come here and to stay here. We need to do the same thing with lawyers and doctors and other professionals. We need our best and our brightest now more than ever, and one way that we can incentivize them to come here and also make college more affordable is providing them with the means to help repay a portion of the debt that they take on once they've received their diploma. In addition to that, we need to make tuition at our state universities as absolutely as inexpensive as it can, so that doesn't fall onto the back of working families that are already struggling to make ends meet, so they don't have to choose between feeding their children when they're young and educating them once they leave the nest.
And my follow-up question is going to be basically, well, how do you propose funding this?
Well, there are a number of things that we can do. One, I think that we need to look seriously at reinstalling a food tax. I think we also should consider placing taxes on certain goods and services. For example, as a lawyer, I don't pay a transaction tax on the work that I do, right? So let it be known that Rockwell Seay is in favor of taxing himself. By putting a tax on certain professional services like that, it will go a long way to be able to provide for education.
Right. Our next question has to do with the budget. In the last session, the legislature left Charleston without approving a budget for fiscal year 2017, and there was a projected $270 million shortfall in the budget, which is not permitted by the state constitution. Governor Earl Ray Tomlin then called the legislature back into session over the summer to fix the hole in the budget, and the legislature did so by making budget cuts, raising excise taxes, and dipping into the rainy day fund. Before the crisis was averted, public employees were bracing for a government shutdown, and as a result of the final budget, benefits to public employees were cut. Now, this question goes to both of the candidates, and I will start with Mr. Seay. What would you do as a state senator to ensure that such a fiscal crisis does not happen again?
Let's be very clear about one thing. The Constitution of West Virginia provides that the people that we elect to the state senate have one primary objective in their service to us in the state senate, and that is to pass a budget in the time frame that the legislature meets. That is their primary constitutional function, and they did not meet it. And as a result of not meeting it, they cost the taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars in a time when we didn't have the money to spare. So I can tell you what I will do if I'm elected to the state senate. I will do everything in my power to ensure that a budget is passed timely, certainly so that no money is wasted. rather than crying over spent or rather raw milk and all these other silly bills that they tried to shove down our throat in the last legislative session. They should have passed a budget in a timely fashion, and when I'm elected senator, so help me God, it shall be done.
All right, and a follow-up question I would like to ask to that is, we're going to get into the gubernatorial race later on, so please hold your opinions about the candidates until then. But your party's nominee, Jim Justice, is proposing that the state take out a $200 to $300 million bridge loan. Do you agree with that idea, and do you think it's fiscally responsible?
I do agree with that idea. We have to fix and repair our crumbling infrastructure, right? We have to provide better bridges. We have to provide better roads. It's important to remember that our roads are what our children travel over in school buses to go to school. It's what our products travel over in trucks to go to wherever they go into the sea of commerce. Our infrastructure is crumbling in West Virginia, and we need to provide for it. In addition to that, the number of jobs that could be created in maintaining and repairing our bridges is an economic factor that we need to take into consideration here too. The cost is not simply measured in dollars and cents. The cost is also measured in how many of our own folks we can put to work.
Thank you, Mr. Seay. Mr. Swope, I'm going to ask you the same question. As a state senator, what would you do to ensure that such a fiscal crisis does not happen again?
Well, as Rocky said, I would make every effort to be able to pass a budget on schedule. However, the situation at the last legislature is misunderstood by Mr. Seay and lots of other people. The budget is, the revenue projections are done by the governor and the governor's office. He brings those to the legislature, and they have to structure the budget to allocate the money according to the budget projections. The budget session was scheduled for 3 days. The legislature, both House and Senate, had reached on day number 3 an agreement on the allocation of that budget that was going to be passed by both houses and was within the budget. On day number 3 in the afternoon, the governor came in and said, by the way, we are now $93 million short, start over. So there was no opportunity for them to be able to find $93 million worth of cuts. Did I say thousand? I meant million. In one afternoon. So that's what necessitated, it wasn't the legislature's fault, it was bad information being given by the governor's office. And that process is the constitutional process that the legislature operates under. If good numbers are given to the legislature, I'm confident that a 3-day session should be adequate to allocate appropriately.
And another question I would like to ask you, what do you believe the balance of budget cuts or tax increases is right, and what programs should be cut in order to balance the budget?
That's to me. That's very difficult to see. As a business, to say definitively a percentage of this or that, I think in all of the above, as you commented on the last budget, had some new revenue, some tax increases, some cuts. And an all of the above formula is probably what'll work. Now, what percentage you apply to each one, you have to actually get into the weeds, get into the numbers, and then come up with a solution that balances all those issues. I'm not opposed to tax increases if they're necessary. I'm not opposed to cost cuts in government if we can find opportunities to do it. So I'll just balance the numbers and I'll decide which ones look right when I get done with it. That's the way you make business decisions.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next question. As a result of the emergency budget, cuts were made to West Virginia PEIA, the Public Employees Insurance Agency. Just last month, PEIA announced that there will be a $25 million benefit cut. PEIA provides benefits like health insurance to public employees like school teachers. Do you believe that it is important that benefits are that the benefits that are being cut should be restored? And if so, how do you propose the legislature should pay to restore those benefits? The first response will go to Mr. Swope.
I agree that those definitely need to be replaced. As far as picking a specific budget to allocate money from, I haven't seen the budget yet, so it's a little hard to do that. But to me, school teacher pay, PEIA's highest priority. It has to go to the top of the stack. And I would put the greatest emphasis on those areas first.
All right, Mr. Seay, the same question. Do you believe that the cuts that are being made should be restored? And if so, how do you propose the legislature should pay for it?
I am absolutely and unequivocally opposed to any cuts into PEIA. We have to fund and we have to fix PEIA. And here's why. Among the folks that receive PEIA are our educators. And in my opinion, educators have the noblest of all professions because educating our young people is the mother of all other professions. We need our best and our brightest doing it. And what we have told our teachers for too long is, you know what, the pay isn't so great, but the benefits are fantastic. And now what we're left telling our teachers is, I really hope you love the job because that's about the only reward you're going to get out of it, right? We have to provide for PEIA so that families don't have to choose whether or not how they're going to get certain medical services for their children or what have you, whether they're going to have to move or to try to go to another state and teach there so that they can provide for their families. It is an absolute top priority. It is not only a political thing that we must do, but it is the morally correct thing to do.
And how do you propose that those benefits being restored should be paid for?
First thing, we need to look seriously at ways that we can increase revenue but spread the burden of that revenue across the spectrum as far as possible so that no one particular group bears that burden any more than any other. A food tax is one way to do that. Increasing the state sales tax by maybe a penny, for example, is a potential way of doing that. Other ways that we could do that is restoring certain severance taxes to the rate that they used to be. There are a number of ways that we can increase revenue in order to pay for those things, and it needs to be absolute top of the list priority of what gets paid for first.
Thank you, Mr. Seay. Our next question is also dealing with the budget. Some have suggested that legalizing and taxing marijuana in West Virginia as a means to raise revenue. In fact, during last summer's legislative session, House Bill 114, a bipartisan marijuana legalization bill, was introduced. Now, I'm not asking you about your support of this particular bill, but I am asking if you believe that legalizing marijuana is something that should at least be looked at as a way of raising state revenue. This will go to Mr. Swope.
That's an interesting one. That would be very low on my list of alternatives to try to raise funds to balance the budget. I'm okay with medical marijuana. I'm okay with raising hemp for rope because it doesn't have anything to do with the highs you get from marijuana. But I have great concerns that marijuana does have long-term negative impact on people's health. And where I would be okay to listen, that would be very low on my priorities of things the state ought to turn to.
Mr. Seay, same question to you.
I'm absolutely in favor of medical marijuana, and I absolutely believe that the possible decriminalization of marijuana is something that this state needs to consider very seriously. The millions, and I mean millions of dollars that places like the state of Oregon and the state of Washington have made, both in terms of taxing the revenue got off the sale of marijuana, in addition to the money that's saved in terms of corrections and enforcement on that side, could absolutely be a huge economic factor that could help us fix our budget. Now, there are pros and cons to the marijuana question, and I'm not necessarily standing before you saying that the legalization of marijuana is the answer to our problems, but our problems are severe to such a degree that I think that it would be the acme of foolishness to say no to something without giving it proper consideration. I will listen to it. I will listen to it happily, and if the numbers add up, then I will support it because what we have to do is fix our budget so we can fix our state.
Do you, Mr. Seay, worry that if we do legalize marijuana that it will make the drug problem in West Virginia worse?
No, I don't, and I'll tell you why. Almost every objective study on the matter finds that in states where marijuana is at least decriminalized, the number of people that are dying of heroin and opiate overdoses actually goes down.
All right, thank you, Mr. Seay. Our next question has to do with coal, and it's a very simple question. Is coal the economic future of West Virginia, or should we seek to diversify our economy? And this one will go to Mr. Seay.
The answer to that question is yes. It's not a question of is coal the answer, yes or no. The answer here is that coal is a part of the answer. Let's be very realistic about something, folks. We have a proud heritage of coal in this state. My grandfather was a UMWA coal miner for 44 years. Coal was what fed me. But coal, it's never going to provide in the way that it once did, at least not if we continue to singularly look at the same buyer, and I'll get to that a little later, hopefully. We have to diversify. We have to put our eggs in multiple baskets, not all of our eggs in the same basket as we have been for 200 years. I believe that we have to put eggs into the coal basket. We have to. But we also have to put eggs into the agriculture basket. We also have to put eggs into the tourism basket, into the manufacturing basket, into every basket, right? We have to diversify our economy in order to thrive and to survive. And I absolutely think that coal is a part of that equation, particularly metallurgical coal in the process of making steel.
Thank you, Mr. Seay. Mr. Swope, the same question to you. Is coal the economic future of West Virginia, or should we seek to diversify our economy?
Well, I can give you a real quick answer. What he said, he covered it fairly well. You have to diversify. Coal is part of it. But I'd like to take just a moment to preach a little bit. I've studied global warming, and global warming scientifically is not caused by burning fossil fuels. The war on coal has destroyed our coal industry for no reason except political. And that's got me upset because they've destroyed my home for political reasons, and it has nothing to do with global warming at all. I could give you an hour-and-a-half lecture on the data that proves that, but take my word for it. We have to fight to get the regulatory burden off of coal to make it cost-effective so we can at least keep what coal business we've got and hopefully grow it some. I don't think it'll ever grow back to the level that it was 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. But we have to defend it, and we have to defend it for moral reasons as well as political.
Now, I will ask a follow-up question on that. Why should people take your word for it that global warming is not caused by the burning of coal when science very clearly says it is?
Well, the science I've studied very clearly says it isn't. If you run the numbers, in the last 150 years, humans burning fossil fuels have added 6/10,000th of 1% to the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And carbon dioxide is not the cause of global warming. 150,000 years ago, the carbon dioxide was 300 parts per million, where now it's 400. So theoretically, the planet should have been colder, right? If it was carbon dioxide, was it cold? It was warmer. 200,000 years ago, the carbon dioxide was 1,700 parts per million, more than 4 times what it is now, and the climate was colder. 500,000 years ago, carbon dioxide was 7,000 parts per million, and the planet was colder. That science disproves that carbon dioxide is the cause of global warming. I tried to make that brief.
Thank you, Mr. Swope. I really had not had global warming part of the agenda, but I'm going to go ahead and ask the question. Mr. Seay, do you believe in the science of global warming?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's enough.
Okay, we're going to move on now. Mr. Swope, your opponent has been endorsed by the United Mine Workers, and considering you did not receive their endorsement, why should a coal miner and their family support you?
Well, because I'll do what I can to approve the coal industry. Labor unions in general do not endorse Republican candidates, period. So
But they did endorse Evan Jenkins for Congress.
Oh, did they? Okay, that's interesting to hear.
And my question is, why if if you did not receive their endorsement, they're open to endorsing Republican candidates, why should a coal miner and their family support you?
Because I'm the one that's going to fight to get their jobs back and to keep their jobs, whether they endorse me or not. I've been endorsed by over 28 business associations, and businesses know more than anybody else on who knows how to create jobs and who doesn't. So I think I have endorsements from the appropriate sector of our economy.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swope. Mr. Seay, you have been endorsed by the United Mine Workers, but you are also a member of a political party that on a national basis has been rather averse to the coal industry. Other than your endorsement from the UMWA, why should a coal miner and their family support you?
I'll tell you exactly why a coal miner should support me, is because I know what a coal miner's wages do. I was fed by them. I was educated by them. My grandfather, who raised me, worked 44 years in a coal mine so that his children and grandchildren could go to school, so that they could do something with their lives. I know the plight of working people because I was raised by working people. His hands did a whole lot more than just mine the coal that turns our lights on and builds our cities. His hands also provided for 2 generations of young people to live and to eat and to have a way in this world. I am most proud. I'm endorsed by every labor union in the state of West Virginia, and so many more organizations. I can't name them all. But I am most proud of the fact that I am endorsed by the UMWA. And this is a true statement. My grandfather said every single time when I was a child, when we sit down to eat, son, everything we have is by the grace of God and the UMWA. I believe it now, and I believe it then, and I'll believe it for the rest of my life.
Well, Mr. Seay, my question was, why other than your UMWA endorsement should a coal miner and their family endorse you?
Yes, sir.
And particularly with you being part of the Democratic Party that is, on a national basis, is averse to the coal industry.
First of all, tying me to the National Democratic Party
I'm not tying you to the National Democratic Party.
is like comparing, not only is it like comparing apples and oranges, it's comparing apples to fruit and Apple computers, all right? I have absolutely nothing to do with Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton has absolutely nothing to do with me. And if anything, I'm a Democrat and she's not.
Thank you, Mr. Seay. We're going to now go to our final question on the Moving West Virginia Forward segment. I'm pretty sure you all know what the answer to this question is to each candidate, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Mr. Seay, who do you endorse for governor of West Virginia, and why do you support them?
I am proud to throw my support behind Jim Justice for governor. And the reason for that is that Jim Justice is a coal man. Jim Justice has made his living operating coal mines. He has made his living in agriculture. He's made his living in business, a wide spectrum of businesses, and he has been widely successful at doing so. I stand behind him and his policies, and also the level of charitable giving that Mr. Justice has exhibited during our once-in-a-thousand-year floods, opening up the doors to his fabulous hotel, the Greenbrier, to those folks, feeding them and clothing them at absolutely no cost, to me, reveals a man of such a character that we would be very fortunate to have him in the governor's mansion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Seay. Mr. Swope, I'm going to ask you the same question. Who do you support in this governor's race and why?
I support Bill Cole very, very strongly. I know Bill Cole personally. He's a man of great integrity. He's there to serve. He doesn't need a job. And Jim Justice's record, I'm afraid, is pretty appalling compared to his. The $15 million worth of unpaid taxes is indicative of somebody who doesn't take the responsibilities of a business person seriously. And some more interesting things is he's got a long time history. I've been around here 30 years, and he's probably bankrupted more companies around here than any other individual I know of. And he says he doesn't have the money laying around to pay it, but he's got plenty of money for his campaign. And I'm kind of questioning myself, how, if he becomes governor and he appoints the tax commissioner, how's the tax commissioner going to collect taxes from his boss?
Thank you, Mr. Swope. A final question in this segment, and I'm going to ask this. Why should your party control the legislature? And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Swope. Well,
because the Republican agenda is finally going to move the state forward. They've already made a lot of progress on several fronts. Legal reform is the number one. West Virginia was in the hellhole of legal climate list for as many years as the publication has been out, and finally got off of it. They only, in year number one of the Republican administration, they passed about a dozen modifications to laws that move West Virginia from the extreme on the wrong end to the center. And as an example of the effectiveness of that, Progressive Insurance lowered their rates 11%, which is to me indicative of the value of passing pro-business and fair and equitable legal structure. And I was a little puzzled when they went to legal reform first, and then it occurred to me, my brother, here's a personal example, my brother was an orthopedic surgeon. He just retired. He came back to Welch, West Virginia when he got out of medical school and internship, practiced about 6 years and had to move to Virginia. His malpractice insurance in West Virginia was $50,000 a year, and this is 40 years ago. His malpractice in Virginia was $12,000. And that's indicative of the price of doing business with our current legal structure. And the Republican administration is trying to correct things like that and bring us back to where we can be business friendly again and people can function here competitive with other states around us.
Thank you, Mr. Swope. Mr. Seay, I'm going to ask you the same question. Why should the Democratic Party control the West Virginia legislature?
To stop the systematic war on working people that has been waged in a violent and unabashed fashion for 2 years. Right to work, for example, which was shoved down our throat, is nothing but a union-busting law meant to destroy the process of collective bargaining to drive wages down. The repeal of the prevailing wage shoved down our throat in the past 2 years, meant only to drive down the wages of working people. The West Virginia Democratic Party is absolutely dedicated to helping working people make ends meet. It's about giving people a hand up, not a hand out. The policies that I'm trying to bring to West Virginia are meant to help working class people. We can talk about being business friendly all we want, but the God's honest truth is that we are a consumer based economy, and your economy is only moves, only grows, and is only lubricated by working class people, middle class people having money in their pockets. And you can never convince me that our economy and our state are going to somehow become better by making sure that working class people make less money. That's just foolish.
Thank you, Mr. Seay. We're now going to move on to an issue that should be fun for everyone. Issues that are specific to this campaign, and you touched on two very big ones. We're going to start with one.
Are we going to get back to those? Because I've got a lot to say about those 2 points.
Would you like a 30-second response?
I need more than 30 seconds. Or is that part of your question?
I can offer you a 30-second response, Mr. Swope.
Okay, I'll try to make this fast. Prevailing wage.
Mr. Swope, we are going to get to prevailing wage.
Okay, if you're going to get to prevailing wage, I'm good.
We're going to cover issues like that.
All right, no problem.
That is what this is about, issues specific to this campaign that the two of you have
Okay.
had public statements disagreeing about it. And I'm going to begin with the allegation against Mr. Swope that his company has hired illegal immigrant workers. Video has been released that purports to show a man working on a Swope construction site in Wayne County who claims he is from Honduras and claims that the other workers are from Mexico. This is likely one of the most visible issues of this particular campaign, and Mr. Swope, I'm going to give you the first question. Are these allegations true that you hire illegal workers? And if not, how do you explain the video?
They're totally false, and it's easy to explain the video. The video was staged to show only Hispanic workers. Didn't show the dozens of other workers that were on the job site. So it misrepresented the actual truth. And there are about half a dozen reasons that this is false. In the first place, I retired 4 years ago, haven't had anything to do with management of Swope construction in 4 years. I could not have hired anyone, illegal or otherwise. Second, Swope Construction Company verifies the legal residency of all employees, and no undocumented worker has ever been found on a Swope construction job. And I've got a document here, what I'm happy to pass out, from the Department of Labor saying the West Virginia Division of Labor does not have any records of violation issued for undocumented workers to Swope Construction Company. So no illegal workers have ever been found on a Swope Construction Company job. That particular job is prevailing wage, and certified payrolls confirm that every worker has been paid appropriately. It's illegal, by the way, to discriminate against someone for race or national origin. And I checked with Swope Construction, and for every day a Hispanic worker has worked on that job, 30 local workers have worked. So a misrepresentation that I personally hire only illegal workers is just totally ridiculous. I think Swope Construction's dedication to hiring local is pretty clear. Over the last 30 years, and I ran some tabulations on this, we've written over 100,000 paychecks to West Virginia residents. I think that's a pretty strong commitment to local hiring. So there's a whole lot of reasons why that is just totally false. And I invite anyone here, even Rocky, if he wants to come to Swope Construction Company's office and see the actual documentation of the verification of people's legal residence, I'll be happy to show it to him.
Right at 2 minutes, Mr. Swope, thank you. Mr. Seay, I have a question for you.
Can I follow up to his comments, please?
You have 30 seconds.
All right, I'm glad you said that you know how to make a payroll earlier, Mr. Swope, because I know that federal law requires that whenever you're providing payroll, you have to provide an address and social security number for every single employee. It just so happens that with the FOIA request I have here from the U.S. Department of Labor, I have the names of every single one of those employees that was in that video. And interestingly enough, there's not an address nor a social security number listed for one of those folks. So it really goes one of two ways. Either those folks were legal, and they don't have a social.
I have to ask my next question, but it is related to that, and you can continue with that.
Sure.
You have used these allegations as a centerpiece in your campaign with your attacks against Mr. Swope. Your campaign has even gone as far as as producing an ad calling him Senior Swope, in which there is a sombrero photoshopped on top of his head. Do these attacks go too far, or do you believe that they are fair?
I believe these attacks are absolutely fair. First of all, senor means Mr. Second of all, although perhaps a flamboyant method of highlighting the problems here, I believe that they are absolutely fair. And to quickly get to my other point, this is the payroll for Swope Construction for those folks that were in that video, right? There is neither an address nor a social security number provided for any of those people, which is absolutely required by federal law. So either they are illegal in terms of they don't have a social security number, or federal law was violated and that information was not provided. There is no social security number for any of these folks, and as a result of that, the only conclusion that can be drawn is that something is being hidden from us.
Mr. Swope, would you like to respond?
Yes, I would. Addresses and social security numbers are not public information. They are information that were provided to the appropriate authorities, and they're not public information. Drawing the conclusion that they must be illegal is just a false assumption. Also, the Department of Labor has checked that job somewhere between 18 and 20 times since the job started, and have not found one single undocumented worker. And they have access to the actual documents that prove the legal residence. But that kind of information is not supposed to be published publicly, or you're breaching the confidentiality of those workers.
Would you like another response?
Please. I have other payroll records that actually do provide the addresses and redacted, of course, social security numbers of other people. It was a requirement by the Wayne County School Board, where that school in Crum was built, that all payroll be certified in compliance with federal law. And federal law requires a social security number and also an address to be provided. I have records that show some workers with it, and I have records that show other workers without it. Of course, the social security numbers in the instances where they were provided are redacted to protect the identities of the folks involved. You know how to make a payroll, Mr. Swope. I have no doubt of that. You've done federal jobs. You built the federal prison. I know that you know that federal law requires that, and I just would like to know why their addresses and social security numbers weren't provided, other than that they don't have social security numbers, sir.
Okay, we'll have to move on from here. Would you like to make a response to that, Mr. Swope?
All I can say is they were provided, period. I can find them for you because, as I say, I haven't run that company for a number of years, but there has never been a deficiency in any certified payroll ever provided by Swope Construction, as confirmed by DOL.
Thank you. We're going to now move on to the second question of the issue specific to this campaign, and it's one that both of you have touched on, and I'm sure both of you will be very, very happy to talk about. We're going to talk about the prevailing wage. During the last regular session of the legislature, a bill was passed that repealed the prevailing wage for state-funded construction workers. Under the previous system, the West Virginia Division of Labor had a set minimum prevailing wage for a particular construction job, and now there are no such wages. In your interviews with the Bluefield Daily Telegraph's editorial board, you indicated a major disagreement over the prevailing wage. Mr. Seay, I will begin with you. Why is it important to re-implement the prevailing wage?
The prevailing wage is important because it puts working class people in charge of their own ability to make a living for themselves. It gives them a means to not only pay their bills, but to be able to buy a car, be able to buy shoes for the kids, be able to go to the grocery store and buy groceries there, and by doing so, providing and creating a job at the grocery store, the shoe store, the car lot, etc. There is no causal link between the repeal of the prevailing wage and construction costs going down, none. There is, however, a very clear and apparent link between repealing the prevailing wage and the quality of workers' lives going down. Less workforce training, a younger and less educated workforce, higher injury rates, lower wages, and lower health and pension coverage, which ultimately falls as a burden upon the state to be able to provide those people with that. So the prevailing wage not only insulates the worker and helps them be able to provide a better life, but it actually also saves on waste from the state in terms of workers not having to get on state assistance for health coverage or something like that.
Thank you, Mr. Seay. Mr. Swope, why do you believe it's important to continue to have no prevailing wage, and what was your motivation to advocate for its repeal as a member of the business community?
Well, to me, it's a matter of cost to the taxpayer. I'm pro-taxpayer. 2 years ago, I did a study of the actual average cost of the prevailing wage for construction workers. And the average worker was $93,000 a year under prevailing wage. The process got corrupted years ago so that only the union wage got published as prevailing wage in all counties, even if there were only 8% of the workers in the state were union. I compared that to Department of Labor statistics for construction workers under free market were $37,000 a year. School teachers, $42,000. Registered nurses, $53,000. Architects and engineers, $54,000. Judges and magistrates, $67,000. Common labor under prevailing wage, $75,000. Now, I'm the expert in construction. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a contractor. And the prevailing wage adds 25% average to the cost of projects. There's about $1 billion worth of projects each year that fall under prevailing wage. That's $250 million a year to fund prevailing wage, which doesn't lay one more brick or build one more square foot of schools. I would prefer to take that $250 million and dedicate it to school teachers and PEIA and other things instead of just one classification of construction tradesmen. So I'm opposed to prevailing wage because the state certainly can't afford it. We would have to raise taxes next year at least 5 to 7% just to cover the cost, and the taxpayers wouldn't get one extra brick laid for the extra money.
Thank you, Mr. Swope. Mr. Seay, would you like to respond to that?
First of all, the assertion that judges only make $67,000 is a joke, and it makes me question every bit of the other numbers that were presented there. I can assure you that there's no judge in the state of West Virginia that only makes $67,000. Elected judges in this state make well over $100,000, and they deserve it given the legal education that they have and the years of experience that is also required to be a judge. That being said, the money, there's absolutely no objective data that indicates that repealing the prevailing wage actually caused construction costs to go down. The only thing that the data reveals is that it causes more workplace safety accidents. It causes people to go into poverty. Getting rid of the prevailing wage is only good for one class of people, the people that own a construction company, so they can pay their workers less. This is an example of a person who is in favor of a law that benefits them and them only.
Okay, we're going to have to wrap that up. Mr. Swope, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, he's just totally wrong. He's a lawyer, not a contractor. There is no correlation between safety, productivity, quality, or anything based on wage rates at all. That's just totally false. I took this data from Bureau of Labor Statistics. It includes just base wages. It was 2 years ago. Base wages without payroll taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And there's no reason why the prevailing wage should be 250% higher than free market wages. The free market's worked for 1 million years. That's the only area that government sets wages, and it's totally inappropriate and wastes taxpayers' money.
All right, we're going to have to wrap the prevailing wage up, and we're going to move on to another hot button issue in this campaign, and that is right to work. In the last regular legislative session, the legislature passed a bill that now no longer makes union membership a condition of employment. Mr. Swope, you are in favor of right to work. Will you please explain why right to work is good for West Virginia and West Virginia workers?
Yeah, right to work is misrepresented. The facts are misrepresented. First, they say that it limits the ability of collective bargaining. I'm in favor of collective bargaining. The law does not refer to collective bargaining in any way, shape, or form, does not refer to a company or to the unions or the company's right to sign a collective bargaining agreement or an employee's right to join the union. The only thing it refers to is gives each individual worker the right to choose whether he joins the union or not, rather than being forced without right to work. He's forced to join the union whether he wants to or not, pay the dues whether he wants to or not, or be fired. To me, it's individual rights versus the union's right to force people to join who may not want to join. They also say that the unions are required to represent members of a bargaining unit or of a company who do not pay wages. That's totally false. The laws have been on the books since 1949. There are laws in 1964. It's been repeated through the legal system many times that unions are not required to represent anybody who doesn't pay the dues to the union and is a legitimate member. So that's just misrepresentation of the facts. The fact is, failing to have a right to work keeps businesses out of the state. 40 years ago, Bluefield, West Virginia built a industrial park. Bluefield, Virginia built an industrial park. I've worked many times with economic development people trying to bring people to West Virginia. 9 times out of 10, the jobs go to the Virginia side, and the first reason it comes to the top of the list is, you mean I only had to drive 4 more miles to get to a right-to-work state. I've seen it happen many, many, many times. Michigan just passed right-to-work, the strongest unionized state in the country 3 years ago. Their economy is booming now, where it was headed for a recession just 3 years ago. So I think data does prove that right-to-work does limit growth.
Thank you, Mr. Swope. Mr. Seay, you oppose right-to-work legislation, and will you please explain why you believe right-to-work is wrong for West Virginia and West Virginia workers?
First of all, right to work is a deceptively named thing. It's not right to work and has nothing to do with right to work. It should be more aptly called the right to freeload, right? Mr. Swope has actually, in fact, grossly misrepresented the facts, because what right to work does is provide union benefits to non-union members who don't have to pay union dues. That is exactly what the law is to the letter. I'll compare it to Sam's Club, right? If everybody in here could go to Sam's Club and get their discount prices and not have to pay the $35 membership fee, how many people are just out of the goodness of their heart going to pay the $35 fee to get into Sam's Club to buy the discount TV? About that many people are going to do that. And that's the entire purpose of the law, because as union membership goes down, the ability to collectively bargain goes down. Because those union dues, a portion of union dues are meant to provide for the cost of their collective bargaining efforts. On average, workers in states with right-to-work laws make $6,000 less a year. The median household income in states with these laws is 13.9%, or over $8,000 less than in states that are not right-to-work. 26%, almost 30% of jobs in right-to-work states are in low-wage occupations, compared to just 22% in other states. There is absolutely no objective link between right-to-work and bringing in new jobs. But there is a clear and apparent link in right-to-work dropping wages, because as unions are weakened and their ability to engage in a collective bargaining process for their workers is weakened, they no longer have the ability to fight for higher wages, and wages go down. Right-to-work is simply an absolute frontal assault on unions, and it is, of all places in West Virginia, grossly offensive, because it was in this very state just a little more than 100 years ago where our grandparents fought and died for the right to unionize. The free market paid them scrip. And unions, my friend, are why we now have things like the 40-hour work week, why we have weekends. It's why our children go into schools instead of mines, and why we're paid in dollars rather than scrip.
Thank you, Mr. Seay. Mr. Swope, would you like to respond to that?
He's just flat wrong.
It sounds like we just have a simple disagreement.
You're right. It's a disagreement.
We're going to move on to other issues facing the legislature, but before then, I want to remind the audience that you do have the right to ask the candidates some questions. So if you do want to ask the candidates some questions, please raise your hand. Dr. White will come around and he will collect your questions. Now we're going to move on to other issues facing the legislature. And this segment will cover other issues, mostly social issues, that are likely to arise in the West Virginia legislature in the next term. The rules still apply. And the first question is about RFRA, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. This bill allows people and businesses in the private sector to follow their religious conscience. This may include the hypothetical of a baker not wanting to bake a cake for a gay wedding. Such bills have been passed in other states, but every time they have been controversial and has had somewhat of a negative effect on business. What is your position on RFRA, Mr. Seay?
There's no difference in that and putting up a whites-only sign on your business. There's absolutely no difference in it. When we discriminate against someone because of who they are, we can blanket it in religion if we want to, but ultimately it's just discrimination, isn't it? Now, I am a Christian by faith, and that is not my faith. My faith doesn't tell me that I can't bake a cake for somebody because they love differently or believe differently than I do. I don't believe that is the example that Christ set forward with either. We have to remember exactly who Christ congregated with, in fact. The notion that we should be able to turn someone away for that purpose is just grossly offensive, disgusting, and I would like to believe that we live in a new and better world where we shouldn't even be discussing that.
Mr. Swope, what is your opinion on RFRA?
Believe it or not, I agree with him. I feel the same way. Discrimination should not be tolerated. Simple as that.
And how do you feel that the rest of your party doesn't necessarily believe, well, not about the discrimination part, but the Republican Party in general supports RFRA bills, supported RFRA bill in the last legislature. How do you feel about that?
You asked me how I felt, not how the party feels. I can't answer for them. If I'm in the legislature, I'll have to deal with them there, I suppose. But I just found discrimination appalling. That's all.
All right, sounds like we went from an issue where there was total disagreement to an issue where there is agreement.
Glad to hear that.
Good for you.
We're going to now move on to another issue, constitutional carry, which is now a law that allows anyone over 21 to carry a gun without a permit. This was passed by the legislature in the last session. Mr. Swope, do you agree with no permit concealed carry?
I do. You want to explain?
Sure, you have 2 minutes.
Well, I'm pro Second Amendment. I think this country was built on the right to bear arms. It's in the Constitution. The Second Amendment addresses that quite clearly. I don't see, well, I visualize things like at Virginia Tech, if there were dozens of guns on campus, would 32 people have died, for example. I don't hear that lots of people are being murdered because of this law or states that have similar laws. And I'm very uncomfortable with governments that take guns away from people and disarm them in history. That's turned out to be pretty catastrophic. So I'm just strong on Second Amendment, and I'm okay with concealed carry.
Mr. Seay, the same question goes to you. What is your position on no permit concealed carry?
I'm also a strong proponent of the Second Amendment, but concealed carry, it has nothing to do with disarming anybody, right? No one is actually taking someone's gun away there. My opinion on this is very simple and has a very simple rationale. I'm a lawyer by profession and I deal with police officers every day. And every police officer that I've ever spoken to has indicated to me that the change in the law is going to be a cop killer bill because they now have to assume that every potential perp is armed. That's going to lead, I believe, to unfortunately, I believe a police officer may very well lose their life because of this law directly. I take very seriously the sacrifice that the police officers make for our communities, and when they indicate to me that this is a bill that will cost them their lives, I believe them, and it is for that reason that I do not support it.
Mr. Swope, I want to ask you the question. The West Virginia Sheriff's Association disagrees with this bill. Why do you believe that their problem with the bill is unfounded?
Well, I don't believe their problem is unfounded, and I'm certainly happy to hear their issues. And if I'm convinced that what Mr. Seay just said is true and that police officers are at a high risk, I would change my position on that point.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swope. We're going to move to another question. I will ask about a potential bathroom bill. This has been popping up in state legislatures across the nation. Bathroom bills are typically designed to restrict men from using women's restrooms and vice versa. However, it can be viewed as outright discrimination against the LGBTQ community. Conversely, municipalities locally, Lewisburg have passed ordinances protecting transgender people's rights to use whichever bathroom of the gender they identify. Where do you stand on this issue, and is it something the legislature really should even consider? Mr. Seay, you go first.
This is a multifaceted question, all right? I don't think anybody likes the idea of a big burly man in the bathroom with their children, their female children, of course, right? But I will say this much, I am absolutely against the President's executive order on this point because I do think it is something that local governments need to be deciding for themselves for the most part. However, that being said, I think that maybe there's a pragmatic solution here. You go to Walmart and there's 3 bathrooms, aren't there? There's a men's bathroom, there's a women's bathroom, there's also a family bathroom which is open to anybody of any gender and multiple people. I think in large part this issue is making a mountain out of a molehill.
Thank you, Mr. Seay. What would you say to someone who's transgendered who feels like if they're required to use that 3rd restroom that they're being discriminated against for their gender identity?
I mean, here's the real question I got is, how do we really know? I mean, do we have somebody in the bathroom peeking under the stall to determine who should be using the boys' bathroom and who should be using the girls' bathroom? I can't bring myself, and I've given a lot of thought to this issue. I thought that it might be something that we were asked, but I just can't for the life of me understand how we enforce such a thing, that if, I was born a man and that I, for whatever reason, went through the processes and stuff to become biologically female. How do you know that I'm not biologically female? You get what I mean? Like, I don't understand how this is enforced or even has become an issue.
And just one last question real quickly. Do you think this is an issue the legislature should even consider?
I think that the legislature needs to consider anything and everything necessary to make our state a better place. I can say that it's pretty low on my list of priorities, though.
Thank you. Mr. Swope, the same question goes to you. What is your position on this issue?
Once I agree with Rocky's position on that, I think society, I've heard a statistic that 0.02% of the population fit into this category. I believe in democracy and the majority rules. 0.02% should not rewrite all the laws and customs of the state. And for a million years, they figured out how to deal with it appropriately without having to legislate a solution, and I think that's satisfactory to me. So I think Mr. Seay's explanation is pretty close to the way I come down on this issue.
And do you believe that it's an important issue the legislature should look at?
Well, any issue that the people find important should be brought before the legislature, or is appropriate to bring before the legislature. It's a very low priority to me, and I would be surprised if dramatic changes in the laws are made because of it. But if it comes before the legislature, I would certainly give it due process and consider all sides of it.
All right, another issue that I want to ask, are there any issues, Mr. Swope, in which you break with your party?
I can't think of any. If you'd give me a menu of issues that they that they believe with, I could tell you yes or no. But I don't think, my beliefs are my beliefs. They're not party beliefs. I have not been indoctrinated in particular. I'm conservative by nature. I believe in capitalism. I believe in fairness for everybody. I don't know where the party disagrees with me on any major issues. Can't think of any.
And Mr. Seay, I'd like to ask you the same question. Are there any issues on which you break with your party?
Well, the National Party, there are quite a few issues with which I break with them. I have a much stronger stance on the Second Amendment, for example, right? Here's the thing. I believe that politics should be about people, not about parties, right? I'm a Democrat and Mr. Swope is a Republican, and I don't think that distinction, the donkey and the elephant, has anything to do with the differences between us as men, and I don't think that it has anything to do with us and how we will each, if elected, serve in the role as senator. I believe that we put too much emphasis on party, and that's why I have proudly called myself an independently minded Democrat.
Thank you. And one final question before we get to audience's questions. Now I'd like to ask you, Mr. Seay, is there anything that you could tell? First I'll start off with this premise. So the West Virginia legislature in the last session removed straight ticket voting from the ballot option. So if you're planning on going and voting straight ticket, well, you're out of luck. You'll have to vote down the ballot. Now, considering that, Mr. Seay, what would you tell to someone who's absolutely for sure planning on voting for Donald Trump to break with the party and vote for you down ballot?
That's a wonderful question. I am absolutely and unequivocally a supporter of West Virginia's working class. My priority is putting West Virginians to work in West Virginia. I believe that a lot of folks that support Trump are concerned about immigration and other things of that nature. And I believe that my stance is on ensuring that West Virginia workers get jobs first would appeal to me.
All right, Mr. Swope, the same question but inversely to you. If someone is going to the polls and they are absolutely for certain voting for Hillary Clinton, why should they break split their ticket and vote for you?
Well, I think passing the law to eliminate straight ticket voting is a good thing, that every citizen ought to be responsible enough to think about and make a choice on each candidate at each seat that they vote for. I think I would vote for me, and I would hope they would vote for me too, whether they vote for Hillary Clinton or not. I think I'm the better candidate. I think I have the experience and the qualifications and the independence and all that. So they should vote for me because of my qualifications, not because of my party.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swope. We're now going to start with audience questions. Do we say who the question's from?
Yes.
All right. Jed Choate asks, what would you do to help combat the drug epidemic in our area, especially the opioid and heroin abuse? And Mr. Swope, I'm going to start with you.
Okay, that's another all the above thing. I think the state is already looking at trying to curb the flood of opiates that come into the state, and that's a high priority to deal with. The long-term solution is jobs. I think there's a strong correlation between a lack of jobs and drug addiction. And I've heard statistics like 50% of the people, if 50% of the people on drugs had jobs, the drug addiction would go down 50%. So you have to approach it from that end as well. You try to drive jobs, give people purpose, give people income. It takes them away from the hopelessness that people turn to drugs because of. I think we have to find the money for rehabilitation and support of people who are on drugs. But if you can limit the supply, provide jobs for people, and then provide the support for people who do get on drugs, that's a major problem, but I think that it's, again, an all-the-above solution.
Thank you, Mr. Swope. Mr. Seay, the same question to you. What would you do to help combat the drug epidemic in our area, especially the opioid and heroin abuse?
I appreciate this question a great deal, seeing as that my own mother died of a prescription drug overdose on medicine that she was lawfully prescribed. She had a job. In fact, she was a registered nurse. She received the medication initially to deal with pain and unfortunately became addicted to it, and that's what it really boils down to, is we have to start treating addiction like the disease that it is. It is addiction. People that are drug addicts are sick, okay? I mean that in the physically ill fashion. We have to invest in treatment facilities. As an attorney, I do a great deal of what's called mental hygiene work, and a part of that is people being involuntarily committed because they're a danger to themselves or others, either on the basis of mental illness or addiction. And I can tell you that for every 300 people that are seeking a treatment facility bed in West Virginia, and for every 300 people, we only have one bed. And that's for the people that have already crossed the threshold of saying, I have a problem and I need help. 300 to 1, we're able to help them. And that number is far too low. We're losing lives at an exponential rate, and those are lives that can and must be saved.
The next question comes from, well, they didn't write their name down, but someone in the audience did ask this question, and it's to both candidates.
I apologize. I have to be groomed.
All right. To both candidates, where do you stand on fracking? We'll start with Mr. Seay first.
Here's an issue that I have with fracking, right, is they don't have to tell us what they're shooting into the ground. We literally have no idea, okay? I think that I could make a lot more of an intelligent decision upon whether fracking is good for West Virginia or bad for West Virginia if I knew what they were shooting into the ground. And by law, they don't currently have to tell us. Now, I know there are a lot of studies that indicate that fracking is very bad for the environment. You know, there's also a lot of economic studies that show that, you know, fracking is providing some jobs and things of that nature. So I think that the first and most important thing we got to do in relation to fracking is that we need to change the law so that they have to reveal exactly what chemicals they're shooting down into the ground in the fracking process.
Thank you, Mr. Seay. Mr. Swope, what is your position on fracking?
From an economic point of view, fracking has exponentially increased the fossil fuels, natural gas that's available for us to use. I mean, exponentially. trying to think, I've got some data on that, but I can't bring it to mind right now. So fracking should be allowed, though I do agree it should be regulated, monitored, and it's my understanding that the fracking process is fairly well structured, and that the government and all the inspecting agencies and stuff do know what's going on underground. If what he says is true, and they don't know, then they should know. So I would agree with his point. But fracking is so valuable to the standard of living of this whole world, we got to make it work, but we have to make it work safely.
And do you not worry about the environmental degradation that could come about from fracking?
So far, there's no data that I've seen that shows there is any measurable. For example, the EPA has certified that no water wells have actually ever been damaged, even though there's a lot of hearsay testimony to that effect. There's no documented evidence so far.
All right, thank you, Mr. Swope. We're going to move on to another question from the audience. Again, no name was provided. How do you plan on funding the improvement of infrastructure for the state's road system? Mr. Swope.
That's an all the above. I think our infrastructure is absolutely critical. We're in a financial crisis right now due to the last few years of declining revenues and increasing costs. How do I plan to do it? Well, I don't have a formula written out yet, but you can't find all the eggs in one basket. You can't find one magic bullet that's going to solve that problem. Drive jobs up, we've already addressed it. Drive jobs up, drive costs down, balance the budget, create jobs, bring more business into the state. The rising tide floats all the boats, and it'll build the roads too.
Thank you, Mr. Swope. Mr. Seay, same question to you. How do you plan on funding the improvement for infrastructure for our state's road system?
One major thing that we can do is you drive from here to Charleston, you're going to go through 3 tolls. You're going to pay $2 a toll, right? And I get that is a burden, and I really do hate their placement. There should be some north of Charleston so that the burden doesn't entirely fall upon southern West Virginia. That notwithstanding, the projected revenue that we could get from those tolls once we completely take them over is $85 million a year. Now here's the kicker. $60 million of that $85 million is from out-of-state folks, truckers, people traveling, etc. That is $60 million that we can use to not only put into our infrastructure, but into our schools and everything else. It's not coming on the back of the West Virginia taxpayer. And so I think that needs to be a centerpiece in finding the funding for that, in addition to some things that I've highlighted in answers to other questions, such as a food tax, an increase in the sales tax by a cent, etc.
Thank you, Mr. This question is specifically for you. You have said an amusement park would be an economic boon to this area. In specific detail, please explain where the funding would come from to start such a huge endeavor. And do you understand West Virginia has the climate to support only 3 months of weather necessary for such a business?
Here's the thing. First of all, an amusement park, of course, would be a private enterprise. The legislature is not going to go and build Rocky Land, although I do think that that's a good name for it. Finally, a laugh. It's too serious in here. Okay. Here's the thing. Right here in Mercer County, for example, we're right off of 77. We're pretty close to 64, and we're also pretty close to 81, the confluence of 3 major interstates. We got lots of land that is undeveloped and unused. Okay. Now, we also live within just a few hundred miles of 2/3 of the population of this country. Dollywood is several hours away. Carowinds is several hours away. There's a few in Ohio, Cedar Point, some others. We are located in a perfect place geographically for something like that to be something that we need to look into. Now, I'm not Walt Disney. I don't know, the nuts and bolts of actually building or maintaining the business of an amusement park. I've only listed it as a potential thing that if we're thinking in the grand scheme of things and how we can make West Virginia a better place, that's something that should be considered because of the great number of jobs and revenues that it could bring here.
All right, thank you. Mr. Swope, do you agree with the not building of Rocky Land necessarily? We can call it Chandler Land if we want to.
Let's stick with Rocky Land. Thanks.
I'm okay with that.
And also, basically, what is your response to that and other tourism ideas? Do you agree that tourism is a good way to bring revenue to the area?
Oh, absolutely, especially in McDowell County, because if there's not the infrastructure and highways and so forth to develop industrial applications, manufacturing, et cetera, in McDowell County, but they do have the ideal climate for ATV trails, and et cetera, et cetera. So tourism as a category is very high on my priority list. As far as whether an amusement park could be sustained with our limited population density, I think market studies could prove one way or the other. And if market studies showed it was feasible, I'd certainly be behind it. I think it's unlikely that our population density compared to Charlotte or other areas would actually support anything of a significant size in just the amusement park category. But to go for things like that, I certainly wouldn't stand in the way. I would try to support anything that might possibly work. And there's always a way to predict ahead of time what the market feasibility is.
May I have a 30-second response? Do you know what was in Kissimmee, Florida before Disneyland came there? Nothing. Do you know what was in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee before Dollywood came there? Nothing, right? We got to think and believe and dream on a grand scale. I believe that that's the type of leadership that we need. And I believe that there's no reason that Princeton or Bluefield or Williamson or Welch can't have something just as good.
All right, thank you, Mr. Seay. This is a last question from the audience. To both of you, why have you felt the need to do negative campaigning? I'll start with you, Mr. Seay.
Because I live in the real world. You have to highlight the differences between you and your opponent when you're running for office. It's not simply, here's the things I propose. Voters, I believe, need to be able to make an intelligent choice based upon the differences in their opponent and the people that are running for office. I believe that it is the duty of citizens to hold their elected representatives' feet to the fire. I make no apologies for the fact that I have used negative campaigns, especially in light of the things that have been said about me. I've been attacked for being a lawyer. I've been attacked for so-called not voting, which is hilarious because I've never not voted. I've, in fact, been attacked for taking a court-appointed case where I have no choice. Be very suspicious, folks, of anybody that would say that someone doesn't deserve a lawyer, okay? I don't always like the people I represent, but that's my job. And the Constitution requires that I defend them to the best of my ability. And let me just tell you, I defend them all to the best of my ability because that is what is required of me in my job. It is what the Constitution says I'm supposed to do. And beyond that, I believe that it is the morally correct thing to do. And just so you know, I'm a very good lawyer. I fight for people. And when I get to Charleston, I'm going to fight for the people. And a part of fighting sometimes requires you to go negative, unfortunately. It is the realistic nature of our political system. I wish that it wasn't necessary, but kumbaya, my lord, is not how politics works.
Mr. Swope, the same question to you. Why have you felt the need to do negative campaigning?
I have not felt the need to do negative campaigning and have not done negative campaigning. Nothing in any of my campaigns referred to him, good, bad, or otherwise. I don't feel it's my job to run against him. My job is to run for me, and my entire campaign has been that. His alluding to me being the cause of these various attacks, totally wrong. I have not been behind, don't even know who has made those comments. The public can do what they want. But I have been very careful not to refer to him, good, bad, or otherwise, in any way, shape, or form, other than, as I did earlier today, to defend myself against allegations about hiring illegals. And the whole thing is about illegals, and I think I've adequately proven that that's not true. So I have defended myself against allegations against me that have come directly from him. But I have not said anything good, bad, or otherwise about him in any of my commercials, any of my print matter, on my Facebook, anything, other than just simply defend myself. I have not done negative campaigning.
Mr. Swope, in your campaign ads, you have made slight jabs at his profession as an attorney, and has been said, and I believe the quote was, "We don't need more lawsuits." Do you not believe that is a form of negative campaigning?
That's not directed at him. That has to do with our legal structure. That comment was intended to refer to our legal climate and the structure of the laws themselves. Because a bad legal structure or a weak legal structure that's not fair encourages lawsuits. That's not a reference to him personally in any way, shape, or form.
May I have a brief retort, right? With all due respect, sir, have the courage to my face say the things that you say. You have on more than one occasion said that I am young and that I have accomplished nothing. You have on more than one occasion attacked me on my profession as a lawyer, indicating that somehow the fact that a poor boy coming from McDowell County who was able to get a legal education somehow disqualifies him from office. I have attacked you, and I have the courage and the strength of character to stand in front of you and say it to your face. Please at least have the same.
Would you like to respond?
It's not his fault I got a 40-year head start on him, but it's a fact.
All right, we're going to have one final question. Mr. Swope, what would you do to increase funding for higher education institutions?
That goes back to the answer I've already done a number of times. It's a very high priority to me, and it has to be done in a business-like approach to the total budget. It's part of the total budget, so you have to deal with it in the context of the total budget. And it's a long-term thing. In the short term, the budget crisis is absolutely critical. John Deskins, the chief economist with WVU, and I'm getting a little personal here for Southern West Virginia, he said West Virginia is in a serious recession. Southern West Virginia is in a depression, a defined depression. This is a tough problem. There's going to be a lot of heavy lifting involved to clean up that mess. But all I can say is that higher education is at top of my priority list. All education is at the top of my priority list. You cannot grow an economy without a strong education system. Now, which rock you look under and how much money you find for this or that, until I see the budget, I can't get real specific about it. But that's what my highest priority is.
Thank you, Mr. Swope. Mr. Seay, the same question. What would you do to increase funding for higher education institutions?
Well, as I've indicated, we need to look at a number of ways to increase revenue, right? And I won't beat that drum again. However, once we have established ways to increase the revenue, the second part of that is making sure that some of it is specifically earmarked for the purposes of education generally and higher education specifically, rather than just going into general revenue, for example. Parts of our increased revenue need to be absolutely earmarked for higher education. The fact that, I'm from McDowell County, for example, and Mr. Swope is too, and God bless him for that. McDowell County produces good people. But 10% of people in McDowell County get the opportunity to get some college. 1% of people from McDowell County are able to go to any sort of master's degree program or doctoral program. And it's not because people from McDowell County, for example, are less than anybody from Mercer County or from California or anywhere else. We have to be doing everything in our power to ensure that our children are being educated, that they're having the opportunity to go to college so that they can spread their wings and make the world a better place from somewhere else, or if they so choose, make their home and their life here. And education is the answer to that. It's not the lone answer to it, but it's certainly the first and the biggest part of it. I am an absolute and will be an absolute champion for education because good teachers are what made me, and I mean through good and hard lessons. Dr. White, who's in this room, gave me a very hard lesson, and I learned from it, and it made me a better man. Good teachers make our economy go round because it's what produces our leaders, it's what produces our teachers, it's what produces everything. If we don't find an answer to the education problem, then West Virginia is lost because, in my opinion, frankly, West Virginia is not only its beautiful mountains and its places and its streams, but most importantly, West Virginia is its people embodied most of all by its children.
Right, thank you. I want to ask one final question. How do you propose that we prevent tuition from increasing at state institutions?
Well, I can tell you one thing, that as a member of the legislature, I will ensure that my votes are always cast in a fashion that our institutions of higher learning are getting the funding that they need so that they don't have to rely upon increases in tuition to do that. Now, at least beyond the standard rate of inflation, of course, right? What we need to do is we need to ensure that always at West Virginia's institutions of higher learning that whenever it is unfortunately necessary and impossible to prevent an increase in tuition, that all state need-based scholarships are raised proportionally.
And Mr. Swope, the same question to you, and this is the final question of the debate before the closing statement. What would you do to prevent increasing tuition at state higher education institutions?
Well, I'll repeat what I said earlier, what he said. He covered it pretty well.
All right, thank you. Well, that concludes the debate, I guess. Are we going to do the raffle tickets? Closing? Well. Mr. Swope, would you please give your 2-minute closing statement?
Okay. I don't have
You
a,
may use the podium if you so wish.
that's all right. I think everybody's heard me so far. So I think I've already made the points that are strong in my favor. I have the experience. I have, as I said, 40 years more experience. As I said, it's not his fault, but it is a fact. And I think experience does count. Business background is very valuable in government, I mean, our government needs a business approach. And one thing I haven't discussed, the only thing I'll throw in as a closing comment, is that I'm dedicated not to myself, but to doing what's right for West Virginia. And one piece of evidence, which has been talked about, but I'm not sure whether everybody here has heard it, I retired 4 years ago. But what I haven't talked about is how I retired. Over the previous 15 years or more, I gave my stock to employees. And when I retired 4 years ago, I had given 90% of the company to the employees. Now, if that's not a signal of somebody who cares more about others than he cares about himself, I don't know what stronger illustration I could make. It cost me a lot of money to give stock to employees all along, and I've done profit sharing for employees through all the years. Probably 3/4 of all the money that Swope Construction made is in the hands of employees, not in my hands. And I think that you all should think about the fact that if somebody's going to Charleston to represent you and do what's right for the state, the kind of person who is that big a benefactor or that benevolent to his own employees is the kind of person who can represent you to the fullest extent rather than himself.
Thank you, Mr. Swope. Mr. Seay, your 2-minute closing statement.
I am going to stand. I take exception to the notion that I'm running for office for myself, particularly from a person who has said that he has not gone negative against me when he just did it. I'm running for office because I want to create a state where our children don't have to leave. If I'm selfish, if I am self-serving, it is only in one capacity. It is because I'm the father of small children and I don't want them to leave. And if that is selfish, then bless my heart, I'm selfish. I want my children and your children and all West Virginia's children to inherit a better state than we did. West Virginia is in crisis. The skies are dark. And I happen to be a firm believer that sometimes it's darkest before dawn. And I believe that if this election goes the way that it should, and that is that in a few days that I am named Senator-elect, that the sun will shine on West Virginia. I am a young man. I intend to live and play with my children under the trees that we will plant together. I believe that West Virginia is more than just a place, as I've said. West Virginia is its people, embodied most of all by its children. And every position that I have on every issue is geared toward making a better state for our children. We have to invest in education so that our children can be better educated and have better lives. We have to provide jobs for people so they can provide for their children so that their children can then get educated and also have jobs. We have to build a better infrastructure and road system so that our children are traveling to schools on safe roads, so that our economy is lubricated by products that are traveling across safe roads. The things that I stand for and represent all have personal indicators in my life. When I say things like my position on drugs, for example, that's not just something that comes out of my mouth for a vote. It is the hope of a son who lost his mother far too young, that maybe other children don't have to lose their mothers and fathers, and that mothers and fathers also don't have to lose their children in the way that my grandmother did. We have become a society of grandparents raising grandchildren with our drug crisis, and I am one of those children. We have to do something about it, or West Virginia is lost. Now, I will not stand before you and tell you that I know the answer to every question, because I don't. In fact, bless my heart, I don't even know every question. But I can tell you this, is that my every vote, my every word, and my every action as your senator will be exactly as I've described, for the purpose of making West Virginia better for our children. I am not self-serving. I am not running for myself. I'm running for you. And I will part by saying this, that if I win this election or if Mr. Swope wins this election, neither one of us alone will be able to change West Virginia at all. The people, and the only people that have the power to change West Virginia, they're not sitting in these two chairs. They're sitting in yours. Thank you for your time.
All right, on behalf of Phi Alpha Delta and Concord University, I'd like to thank you for coming out tonight, being attentive and asking wonderful questions. We thank the candidates and wish both of them well on the 6 days remaining on the campaign trail. We hope everyone gets home tonight safely. Don't leave yet. We have a raffle coming up. Early voting will be going on for 3 more days, ending on Saturday, and the election will be held next Tuesday, November 8th. If you don't know where your polling place is, please check wvsos.com. And now we have Tyler for our raffle.
I just want to say again that there was a lot of hard work that was put into this night, and we thank both of the candidates for coming out. I want to give a round of applause for Chris, who came up with the questions.
What a good job, Chris.
I myself say that he did a fantastic job, blew me away. He's a political science major here on Concord's campus, and thank you for the hard work that you put into it. If any of you do not know what Phi Alpha Delta is, the pre-law fraternity, there's pamphlets on the table outside, so feel free to pick one of those up. Once again, I want to give a round of applause to both of the candidates for coming and showing up. So. And last but not least, thank you to you all, because without you all, this event doesn't serve much of a purpose. So we thank you all. We hope that you go out and vote and make the decision you so choose. Thank you. You're free. Oh wait, we got to do the raffle. Sorry. The most important part. So 47. Oh, get your tickets out first if you're ready. The number is 474405. $25 sheets gift card.
Hey, hip hip hooray, man.
Yep. It's to the
Congratulations.
best of my understanding that both of the candidates are willing to stay at least for a few moments to shake hands if you so choose. Thank you guys for coming out again.